Think about the last time someone disrespected you, or dismissed you, or said something that was wrong about you, about your work, about your character. What did you do? You explained yourself. You defended yourself. You made your case. Maybe you were calm. Maybe you weren't. But you responded. You made sure they understood. And when it was over, did it change anything? Or did you just spend energy convincing someone who had already decided and walk away feeling worse than before? Here is the thing Seneca understood 2,000 years ago that almost no one is willing to face today. Every word you use to defend yourself to someone who didn't ask is power you are voluntarily handing away. You are not defending your position. You are confirming theirs. This is not about being passive. This is not about swallowing disrespect. This is about understanding where power actually lives. There is a concept in social psychology called reactive devaluation. When you respond to a provocation, even logically, even correctly, the act of responding signals that the provocation landed. It signals that the other person had enough power over you to require a response. This is why the most dangerous people in any room are usually the quietest. They are not quiet because they have nothing to say. They are quiet because they have understood something. Most people never learn. The one who needs to explain is always the one with less power. Think about the men you have respected most in your life. The ones who carried real authority, not just rank, not just volume. The ones whose presence changed the temperature of a room. They didn't fill silence. They used it. They didn't defend themselves to people who challenged them. They simply continued. And the contrast between their stillness and the noise of everyone around them, that contrast was the authority. Seneca saw this pattern everywhere he looked, and he named it precisely. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was one of the most powerful men in the Roman Empire, advisor to Emperor Nero, playwright, philosopher, statesman, one of the wealthiest private citizens Rome had ever seen. He had also been exiled, nearly executed, and spent years watching men with more power than principle destroy themselves and everyone around them with their own words. He was not writing theory. He was writing from inside the fire. In one of his letters to Lucilius, letter 3, he wrote something most people read past too quickly. It is not that I am brave, it is that I know what deserves my attention. He was describing a practice, the deliberate decision to withhold response, not out of weakness, but out of the understanding that your attention is currency, and most people do not deserve it at full value. But it was his observation of Nero's court that sharpened this lesson into a blade. He watched men, educated, intelligent, powerful men, destroy their own standing in the empire by talking too much, by explaining themselves, by trying to manage how they were perceived. Every explanation was a negotiation. Every defense was an admission. Every word spent proving themselves was a word that confirmed the original doubt. Seneca wrote about this in De Brevitate Vitae, on the shortness of life. Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything else belongs to others. Only time is truly ours. He meant time broadly, but he meant attention specifically. The moment you spend your energy managing someone else's perception of you, you have given them something that can never be returned. The loudest person in the room, Seneca observed, is always the most frightened, because noise is what people make when silence feels dangerous. So why do men keep talking when silence would serve them better? 3 reasons, and they compound. The first, explaining yourself feels like control. It is the opposite of control. When someone challenges you, or dismisses you, or disrespects you, the discomfort is immediate and physical. Your nervous system registers it as a threat, and the fastest way to reduce that discomfort in the moment is to respond, to explain, to correct the record. It works. Temporarily. The discomfort drops slightly the moment you start speaking, but what you have actually done is trained yourself to reach for your voice every time you feel threatened. And every time you do, you are teaching every person in that room exactly how to move you. They no longer need to beat you in the argument. They just need to provoke you into having one. The second, most men confuse being understood with being respected. They are not the same thing. You can be completely understood, every point accepted, every fact confirmed, and still not be respected. Respect doesn't come from being right. Respect comes from how little you need to prove it. The man who lets a false accusation pass in silence is not the man who lost that exchange. He is the man who demonstrated he does not require the room's approval to know his own value. That is not something you can explain into existence. It has to be demonstrated. And it is demonstrated through what you refuse to do. Here is the honest question. Think about the last time you over-explained. You know the moment, when you kept talking, past the point where it was necessary. When the argument was over, but you didn't stop. Why didn't you stop? Not the surface answer. The real one. Was it because the other person needed more information? Or was it because you needed them to see you differently? Because if it was the second one, they saw it. Everyone in that room saw it. And it told them exactly what your words were trying to deny. Silence, in that moment, would have said more. And it would have cost nothing. The third reason, and this is the one that cuts deepest. Most men have never been taught that silence is an active choice. They understand loud as assertive. They understand quiet as passive. So they default to loud, because passive feels like losing. But there is a third state that most men never find. Deliberate stillness. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say. The silence of someone who has decided that this conversation does not warrant the cost of his voice. That distinction is everything. Reactive silence, the silence of someone who is hurt and retreating, gives power away just as surely as over-explaining. Deliberate silence, the silence of someone who has assessed the room and decided it does not deserve a response, accumulates power. Every time you choose it, the room recalibrates. People begin to work for your attention, instead of assuming they have it. That recalibration is authority, not demanded, not explained, demonstrated. So here is what you actually build. Not a mindset, a practice. Step 1. Audit your last 7 days. Think back on every conversation where you explained yourself, where you defended yourself, where you kept talking past the point of necessity. Not to judge yourself for it, to identify the trigger. Was it a specific person? A specific type of challenge? A specific environment? Work? Family? A group? Your pattern is running on a trigger. Find the trigger before you try to change the behavior. Because without the trigger, you're fighting blind. Write it down. One sentence. The situation that makes you reach for your voice, when you should be reaching for your silence. Step 2. Define your response window. When you feel the trigger, give yourself a physical rule, not a thought. A rule. Because thoughts can be argued with. Rules are pre-decided. 3 breaths before you respond. Every time. No exceptions. This is not about delay for its own sake. It is about breaking the automatic loop between threat and noise. In those 3 breaths, one question. Does this response serve me? Or does it serve my need to be seen as right? If it's the second, say nothing and watch what happens. Step 3. Start letting the last word belong to them. This is the hardest one, because it feels like losing. It is not losing. It is the practice of demonstrating, not declaring, that you do not need the final word to know where you stand. Start in low-stakes situations. A disagreement with a colleague. A moment in a group conversation where someone says something wrong. Let it pass. Say nothing. Hold the silence. And notice what happens in the room. Notice that the absence of your response is louder than any response you could have given. That is Seneca's lesson made physical. The loudest person already lost. You are not going to be the loudest person. You came into this video thinking about someone who disrespected you, someone who dismissed you, someone who got away with something because you didn't respond the way you should have. I want to offer you a different reading of that moment. Maybe you didn't fail to defend yourself. Maybe, without knowing it, you held something back. And maybe the anger you felt afterward wasn't the anger of someone who lost. It was the anger of someone who almost understood what their silence was worth and didn't know how to use it yet. Seneca spent decades watching men destroy themselves with their own voices, not their enemies' swords, their own words. He wrote, and I want you to hold this. The first step toward making yourself master of any situation. Learn to endure what you cannot avoid. You cannot avoid being provoked. You cannot avoid being misread. You cannot avoid people who want to see you react. But you can make the deliberate choice, every single time, to deny them the confirmation they are looking for. Your silence is not emptiness. It is the most loaded thing in the room. Use it like you know that. If this series is landing, subscribe. Episode 3 is next. Epictetus. Boundaries. Not the therapy speak version. The stoic version. The one that starts with admitting that no one decided to use you. They just discovered they could.